Farcaster 101 is an educational series brought to you by GM Farcaster in partnership with Snickerdoodle, building off of their State of Farcaster report, which you can access at Snickerdoodle.com. This 12-part series introduces all aspects of the Farcaster ecosystem and helps you get started building your social graph and brand on Farcaster. GM Farcaster, and we are back for Farcaster 101, Module 9, about content creation. And you're here with Nounish Prof and Adrian. And just a reminder, this series, we are quite a few modules in. So if you are brand new to Farcaster and found this one first, I definitely would take a step back, go back to Module 1. If you are already on Farcaster, you're familiar, then starting here is probably fine. So Adrian, are you ready to talk about some content?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's jump in. So we're going to, in this module, we're going to talk about how to cast, content stats, and different types of casts. And then in module 10, we're going to go into more best practices, show you some of our favorite casters, talk about different types of content that works well on Farcaster, and we'll also dive into brand accounts and how they tackle Farcaster a little differently than other platforms. So just to kind of level set, casts are the new tweets. So here's an example from Adrian talking about Farcaster 101. So essentially when Farcaster launched, it was a text-based type of platform. There weren't even, you couldn't even share images at first. That has come over time. Video came a little bit later. And so you will see sort of focus in a more highlighting on the actual text-based type of casts. But one thing to note as well is that links on Farcaster and Warpcast are not penalized in the algorithm. So what I mean by that is a lot of other social media platforms will either hide or not highlight tweets or posts that have links in them that take you outside of their platform. They also have sort of done different things by building in browsers into apps so that you don't leave. So with Farcaster, there's not as much focus of trying to make sure you don't leave. It's okay. You can share links. You won't be penalized for that content. And also other types of content that we're going to talk about in terms of different ways to present that information. And Adrian, maybe you can talk about some of these stats that we're seeing here with Snickerdoodle. And this came from Snickerdoodle's State of Farcaster report in 2024. And maybe you can just chat a little bit about this.
Yeah, so what you're seeing here is data from the Farcaster hubs on kind of how frequently people are casting. And really this follows the 1% rule, or you might know it as the 99-1 rule of other social networks, which says typically 1% of a social network is making most of the content. So it's like 90% of the people are lurking, 9% tend to kind of like lightly engage, maybe reply, like a cast, but it's really a very small percent of the people who are the ones actively creating the bulk of the content. And Farcaster is no different than other ones. So on Farcaster, you'll see that most of the users, this was from the Snickerdoodle State of Farcaster report that dropped in about September of 2024. Most of the users were only lightly engaged, casting fewer than 25 times per month. And only 1.1% of users were casting more than 250. I would call out, if you're new to Farcaster, really just any social network, this should be a huge opportunity because competition is small. There's only a small percent actually creating content. So I encourage people like really lean in and cast and create content because there's tremendous opportunity for people who do that. And I think Nounish Prof and myself are examples of that.
You don't even want to know. Like definitely we're in that top percentage for sure by a lot. Holding things up here. But it is, I think and we'll talk about this more in our next module, but to highlight your point, huge opportunity here for especially if you have a niche focus that nobody else is talking about. You're going to find an interested audience that you can capture their attention for sure. This is from the Farcaster Explorer Dune dashboard. And this is kind of looking at trending words and topics. And this is something you can actually look at. It does change over time. But this dashboard is super helpful for checking out different different content categories and different stats about the about content that we see on Farcaster. And it can be super, super helpful when you're trying to understand what's happening there. So you can see trends in terms of words and what is trending at the moment. DGen is always trending a lot. As we talked about in our last episode, our last module, tipping and the tipping culture does drive a lot of that content. So it might be very simple. What it's picking up on is just a tip where I might say, loved that cast, 111 DGen, $ DGen. And that's what you're going to see picked up on. You'll also see various words in all different languages because it is a global platform and there is a huge concentration coming from the Asian market as well. So there's a lot of that happening as well. And then you'll see things like Moxie and Farcaster and different words that are happening. But more important, what else you'll also see on this dashboard is the Farcaster users by tier. And this was a ranking and strategy created by Ilemi at Dune. And he set this up. He was the head of the Dune Wizards for a while there. And he kind of created this metric to measure how somebody was creating content, what level they were at, and it included engagement in that as well, and a certain type of engagement score. So you have VIPs who are sort of at the top of this list. They get a lot of engagement, have a lot of followers, and cast a lot. And then you have influencers, star, active, and NPC, meaning they don't cast really anything at all. And this kind of really demonstrates what we were just talking about in terms of the 99-1 rule is what you're seeing right here in terms of active star. And then you have this large group that's NPC and not really doing anything at all. But also, again, this highlights the opportunity, right? This is a small number of folks who are driving a majority of the content on the platform. There's plenty of room for others to carve their niche out here. You can also see who exactly is active and what channels are active, which we'll talk more about next time. But you can see all the active users. You can see trending Farcaster users. You can sort this by how long they've been here on Farcaster, etc. And you can also track your own stats as well. But this also gives you a really good list of folks to follow because you know that they're producing a lot of great content if it's getting this level of engagement. So there we go.
Excellent. And I'll get just 2 pieces of advice if you end up, and we'll link this dashboard so you can kind of play in it. But we covered this in a previous module, but I'll say it again, follow a lot of people. So yeah. I think there's a little bit of a meta in other social networks where people try to, they think it's more important to have more people following you than who you're following. No one gives a crap about that at Farcaster. The best thing you want to do for an early Farcaster or an early social network is like follow a ton of people because the network's still pretty small and you want to be able to learn as much as possible. So that's,
I think
that's
for my first
I did
year,
early on.
I think for my first year, I was following way more than than were following me. And that was until very recently, until about a year ago.
Yeah. And you can always trim back later, but just don't over index. Don't try to create or cultivate the perfect feed with the perfect number of followers. Just follow a ton of people. And these dashboards are a good resource. And there's a few others we'll show later in the module where you can that will tell you who are good people to follow. And then the second piece of advice is on the word cloud, like Nounish Prof was explaining. This is just pure, what are the words that are most frequent? Really interesting, I think, to see. But just to reiterate, it lacks context. And so I'm going to give a shout out. If you want to know, kind of keep a pulse of what is contextually interesting and what contextually people are talking about on Farcaster, we host GM Farcaster, which is a 3 times a week live stream news show about Farcaster. So when you're done with Farcaster 101, you want to subscribe to that, because that's a good way as well to stay up to date in terms of like what content is popular and what people are talking about on Farcaster.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree. That's the best way to keep up on what's happening is us. Watch us. We'll keep you up to date. And we talked a little bit about this already. Farcaster's star users drive engagement. We just showed that dashboard where you can see a lot of the content is coming from that VIP, influencer, and star categories. That's the bulk of it, but it's not the bulk of the user base. So there's plenty of room to grow.
Plenty of room. And we should actually also point out that that dashboard was not created by the core Farcaster team. Just like so many things that we've been pointing out, Farcaster is permissionless and composable. So that means anyone from anywhere can build analytics, graphs, apps on top. So that dashboard we showed was completely unrelated to the core team. It was just someone built it for the good of the community.
Same with the State of Farcaster report. So Snickerdoodle built that without permission from the team, did their own surveys, plus took the on-chain data and was able to do that all permissionlessly and build this report out that we're using as a basis of a lot of slides today. So the way we've kind of been structuring some of these have been to add a little bit of that data and information in, and then get a little more practical in the second module. So that's what we're looking at today. And this also kind of speaks to creators dominate the space. In other words, it is those who are building things. So creator being a very sort of large encompassing term of developers, creators, content creators, media, artists, a whole bunch of different aspects of this. You do see dominating who are creating content on Farcaster. So you're going to see a lot of art, a lot of photography, music, but also a lot of dev discussions and very high level technical discussions and sharing things around that as well. So there's quite a variety of different types of content, but it's again leans into that builder energy we talked about earlier in one of our modules as well. Anything you want to add to that here, Adrian?
Nothing to add.
All right. Moving on, casting with frames. So we mentioned there's different ways to create a cast. We showed you the text-based cast in the first one. We'll talk about a couple others, but one very popular method of casting is frames. So whether that's coming from an external app that you take that link and it turns into a frame, or you can use something like cast actions or composer actions to create a frame that you then cast. And this can be some very interactive and popular content on the feed. So this is another way to do this. And you can either just be sharing a different frame that somebody else created, like with Paragraph, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, or you can be creating your own through the Nanar Frame Studio or something like that. And I'll just direct you back to our modules on frames, where we really dove into this in more detail. That was modules 3 and 4. And that really dives into the how-tos and everything about frames and all the different types of frames that you may want to cast as part of your content strategy. And this is just a little bit more about that variety of frames available to cast. Again, you can, in that module, you'll see we did demonstrate going into a cast, clicking the 4 little boxes to create a composer, to use the composer action to create your frame. And that is what is demonstrated in this image right here. This is an events.xyz frame. So the information was created as part of either part of a composer action or going to events.xyz. and then sharing that link, or doing it directly within the cast to create the event frame by entering in the necessary information, and then it populates the frame itself. So very popular way to share content on Farcaster. Anything else you want to add about frames or using frames within your content that I may have missed? Or reminders?
You didn't miss anything, but just the reminder, frames are a way that kind of creates more dynamic, interactive experiences within the feed. Definitely go back to modules 3 and 4 to catch up on frames. And there's no penalty for using frames. You don't get a boost for using frames. The algorithm doesn't care. It's just a tool that you have, to create interactive and dynamic content, I think.
Yeah, exactly. This kind of looks at the best times and days to cast. And Adrian, if you can take this one and just kind of talk about your thoughts on this and sort of our best practices here.
Yeah, I think this is always interesting to me because new people who come onto Farcaster are always wanting to know, like, when should I cast? Is it most active in the morning, on weekends, in the evening? What about different time zones? This was the first time I've kind of seen that you look at the data, and there's probably a little bit of a variation. There seems to be peaks mid-morning, and that's kind of U.S. Eastern time. From our experience, though, I'd say early on, it definitely mattered because Farcaster was really small, and there were concentrations of people. So I know people in Asia or Europe didn't have as much activity, and it was like, oh, we're going to wait for the US to wake up, then we'll be able to get some engagement on our casts. It's no longer like that. So I think Farcaster has activity around the clock. And I think people new to Farcaster, if you kind of have, especially if you have that kind of brand mentality of like, I'm trying to get the most out of Farcaster, when should I cast? Our advice is just, it doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. So cast when you're active, cast often, and there tends to be activity at any time you need.
Yeah, I agree with that. And even looking at this chart, it's not that dramatic. Yes, there's a peak here, but it's not a dramatic difference because it is a global community. You do have people who are very active who might be on the opposite side of the world as you. So you may not be connecting with them live, but they are likely to still see your casts later on. And it's very rare that this comes into play, except for, I'd say, if there's a live event happening or something like that. That might be a different story. But otherwise, like when Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight recently was just happening. Obviously, when that's happening in real time, the content related to that is going to be more useful at that moment. But that is pretty rare. Most of the time, what you're casting is not going to be directly tied to a moment in time. So when in doubt, just cast it. Photos and GIFs and videos can be shared in casts, but one thing to note is that, and this is going to get a little tricky, I'm going to say it in one way and then I'm going to totally correct myself. Unlike other content platforms like Facebook, like Twitter, there isn't a built-in GIF app that you can just go to the little GIF button, click it, and post it. But you can actually cast them. There is, however, a composer action where you can do that if you have a subscription to the Hypersub that connects with that. So you can actually add your own in there. The other way you can share GIFs is just by saving them to your camera roll and sharing them in a cast as a photo. And that does work as well. So a couple different ways to do it. It's just not built directly into Warpcast itself. Video sharing. Yes. Video sharing is also available, but it was made widely available to anyone with a 10,000 FID or lower, or by request. And the reason for this was just to ensure safety of video sharing and make sure that that content was safe for everyone. Also to create less work for the team to have to moderate that content and to be concerned about anything that might not be legally able to be shared on a social platform. So kind of looking at those who've been around for a while, assuming that, if they're still here, they're good to go. So giving them the permission to share that, but then also being open to allowing others who have shown they have some good content to share and aren't going to abuse the privilege. So if you do not have access to share video and would like to, tag us or tag Dan, DWR.eth, and we'll see if we can help make that happen. Anything else to share on videos and photos? And by the way, videos can only be up to 5 minutes long. So there is that limitation as well for storage purposes.
Yeah, maybe just a little context on why video isn't bigger. And I think the answer is it's just not yet, because Farcaster is a emerging social network. They're trying to build a protocol, build a new social network from scratch. The core team is lean, and they're very focused on kind of the priorities that they think will move the needle in terms of finding a product market fit. So I think it was just recognition of it's going to be very hard to compete against the TikToks of the world or the Twitters of the world that have seemingly infinite, already kind of won a social network at scale and infinite resources. So it's not because we don't like video. It's just, it hasn't been prioritized. I think we will see more and more video apps. We're also seeing other video apps being built on top of the social graph, like apps like Dracula. So that is why a lot of new creators come in and immediately freak out because they can't upload videos. So it'll happen. So just, I think just the reminder of Farcaster still early and
Absolutely.
And still being cooked.
Great point about Dracula, and also Stream, STREAMM, stream.tv, I believe it is another method, or you can look for that account on Warpcast, is another method to share video as well. So there is a couple different options out there, Dracula Stream, and then the in-app on Warpcast to be able to share video. Dracula is a great option and a great workaround. So long form, there is a limit on tweets, on casts, and there is a limit on threading. So unlike Twitter, where you can kind of line up your thread all together as one thing, you cannot do that directly in Warpcast. Now, I believe there are some other clients where you can do that. Am I right there?
Yes, you're right.
Sure. Yes.
There's other clients. Supercast is one that has native support for threading. Warpcast does not have native support in terms of being able to create a thread and hit send all at once. You can kind of create your own threads by casting and then replying to it.
Right. Mm-hmm. That does work. Refresh in between so that you see the replies and make sure you're going to the next reply. A little bit more manual, a little bit more friction, but can be done. And then the other way to share long form content is by using different apps like Paragraph. Paragraph is perfect for this. You can write it at paragraph.xyz, take your link once you publish it, drop it into Warpcast, and boom, you have your long form content right there. It can be read directly in app. So great option. Also, if you share videos, like a YouTube video link within the Paragraph post, it will be able to be played within app. So within the mini app, that is the Paragraph post. So super useful if you're sharing things like a podcast. For example, these videos right here get shared within the accompanying Paragraph post, and you can watch the video while also looking at the other content right within the mini app. And then finally, there are some rewards for good content on Farcaster. So good content is rewarded in a few different ways. And the only one that's directly from the Merkle team is the $5 USDC daily rewards for the top 100 casters based on an engagement score. So the algorithm's choosing this. It's not a manual choice by the team. And a note on that, this is a current experiment running as of when we are recording this. We do not know if it will continue past the end of the year. So just a note, but there are 2 others that will continue on for at least the time being. Tipping via DGen and other chains such as Ham, and various ways that you can do this, from individuals tipping to other individuals for the content they deem to be good. And then Moxie, which is a built-in cryptocurrency, which we talked about last time, that you're accumulating rewards based on your cast and who likes it, recasts it, or comments. So a couple different ways that content can be rewarded. And we also wanted to share this, which is the top Warpcast rewards dashboard. So this is all the folks who have been rewarded for their content by the Merkle team based on engagement. And as you'll see, this is a fantastic list, again, of people to follow and to interact with on the feed. They tend to produce incredibly high quality content, Keckers being at the top of this list, who we just love. But also pretty much anybody who you see on this list, including number 25, Adrian. It's a good one to follow. But all of these folks, great follows and great people to interact with. And this can give you a little bit of inspiration as well to hopefully get some great content going and earn some rewards. Any other thoughts on that, Adrian?
I love the rewards. I love the idea of getting paid for content. I think many people in the decentralized social space and Web3 social space feel that way. And we're here because we've seen what happens with the Web2 social giants, which is they've accrued a ton of value. Even though all of the users have created all the content, most of the value gets dispersed around the corporate network and captured in the corporate network and not filtered through to the users who are creating content. A lot of people come to Farcaster and immediately assume like, hey, this is decentralized. How do I get paid? You're going to pay me for my content. You don't automatically get paid. There's nothing that automatically makes it, but because Farcaster is a protocol built on crypto rails, it makes it really easy to get paid and for other people to do it. So these are just great examples of, like we said, that yes, Merkle and the Warpcast team as the core team is doing one experiment, but there's other ones as well. And even if some of these experiments and others will pop up. So exactly. It's a really interesting space to be.
I forgot about rounds as well. There's a tool called Rounds that is built in, that has built on top of the Farcaster social graph, that allows for anyone to create sort of a reward pool and then have set certain criteria and then be able to manage those rewards being dispersed in a very seamless, very easy way. So lots of different ways to earn for your great content on Farcaster.
Yeah. And I'll put out an offer if you're new to Farcaster and you want to reward your community or figure out a way to provide rewards. There's ways to do that, Rounds being one, but ping Nounish Prof or me because we'd be happy to talk you through it. If you are new to Web3, or I'd say if you're not new, maybe this all makes sense to you and you're used to it, the world of decentralization. I came from the enterprise kind of corporate world, and I still find it interesting of like, I want someone just to tell me, here's everything you need to know about Farcaster and it won't change. And here's the centralized resource. It doesn't exist, and it's impossible to create because every day there's new people building on top.
Yeah.
So because it's not centralized, there's no one source of truth of these are all the ways you can get paid for content on Farcaster. So that was like a little mindset shift for me that I had to embrace, that it was like, oh yeah, well, here's what it is today. Tomorrow might be different. 3 weeks might be different, but there's always going to be ways to get paid or there's things to be built. So I find Farcaster to be this like incredibly exciting place to be as a user and a builder. And as an educator, it makes it a little difficult because we'd love to tell you everything you need to know, except it keeps changing.
Yeah,
so
if
you're new,
all the time.
if you're new, just embrace it. And if you're not new to Web3, then you understand that that's the way decentralization works.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people building things in the background that just aren't ready to talk about it yet. And it literally could be tomorrow we have a whole new thing. And that happens all the time. And it's, to me, the most exciting part of it. But if you are uncomfortable with change or, the unknown or whatever, it's going to feel a little, but it's, to me, a lot of fun. to see what people are going to build and what's going to happen next, because we just never know. We never know what's happening
If you're
next.
uncomfortable with change, get comfortable with change.
Get comfortable with change. Stay.
Get comfortable.
Stay. Just get comfortable.
Just, yeah.
And in our next module, we're going to get into content creation best practices. We're going to show you a few different case studies of folks who we think have done amazing, coming in brand new and becoming just incredible content creators, and who are getting rewarded for that content as well, and showing kind of what they've done to boost their engagement in a very organic and natural way. And then we'll also just give you a few tips on how to approach that and best practices for your own content. Anything else, Adrienne, before we sign off for this module?
Nothing else.
That's
I think
it.
we covered it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you in module 10.